Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the first ever week of Polsky Accelerator Demo Days. My name is Will Colgrove. I will be moderating the pre-pitch panel today. I lead the Edwardson Social Entrepreneurship Program at the Rostondi Center for Social Sector Innovation at Chicago booth. We are a sister center to the Polsky Center. And in my role, I lead the social entrepreneurship and impact investing activities. I've been fortunate to work with a number of the teams presenting here today, a number of whom participated in our John Edwardson Social New Venture Challenge, or the SNVC. The best part of my job is always seeing talented students looking to use the tools of entrepreneurship to solve social problems, and I'm so excited to see the progress that a number of these teams have made today. I'm excited to welcome everyone. This is a week filled with conversation and celebration, all built around the important problems that these accelerator companies are committed to solving. The Polsky Accelerator was launched in 2012, and the goal has always been to give UChicago students and alumni startups an opportunity to work intensively and solely on their businesses and social enterprises. It's a collaborative and dynamic environment over the summer. It's a 10-week sprint of full throttle commitment to growing their businesses. Obviously, things looked a bit different this year while everyone was working through a new virtual world. But I'm so blown away by the resiliency that these teams made in these very challenging times and their ability to work through all of the uncertainty in the world. And again, I'll just say it's been fantastic to see the growth in accelerator teams working on social ventures and ed tech over the past several years. I want to issue a very special thanks to the donors for this program. This would not be possible without the support of the Caruso Zio Foundation, Donna and Philip Zarconi, Ellen Rudnick and Paul Earle for their support. Again, without you, none of this would be possible, so thank you so much. Today's program is going to feature a brief panel discussion from some fantastic judges. We're all intersecting in the social entrepreneurship and ed tech worlds, and then we'll have our pitches from the Polsky Accelerator teams. I encourage all of you watching to engage with us in the comments section under the live stream. All right, so with that, let's get started. Again, today's pitches are in the social enterprise and ed tech track. And as you'll see, they cover a wide range of subjects from philanthropy, education, legal services, and more. And to me, this is really a great example of how diverse a field social entrepreneurship really is. It's not about what you do, it's about how you do it. And I think social impact is possible in a wide range of industries, even those that might not seem to be as discreetly impactful as others. So as long as our venture can articulate a clear theory of change, it's possible to drive real social impact alongside your core business operations, whether for-profit or nonprofit. And I think the judges we have in this room today really speak to sort of the diversity of backgrounds and interests that can intersect with the field of social enterprise. So I want to ask each of our judges to introduce themselves and tell us sort of what social enterprise means to you. And let's start with Manish.
Thanks, Will. First of all, welcome to all the participants. And I was very impressed with what Will and the Polsky Center did with the SNVC with an online event. So it is really cool to see all of you and the energy. I've been an entrepreneur for the last 25 years, primarily in the edtech space. And that started rather serendipitously. I was working at a medical device company and then made the switch and have never looked back since. There's been multiple companies, and then we can talk about my background later or at a different time. But I wanted to talk about a little bit about your question, Will. I think it's very meaningful because I think social enterprises or social enterprise is actually redundant. I think all enterprises or any enterprise will have to be social and is already social. And if you look at a survey that was done by Fortune last year of the Fortune 500, fewer than 10% of the CEOs actually focus and said that they would only focus on profits as the main driver and disregard or not pay any regard to social. So I think social is increasingly such an important point that I would hope, my hope is that the actual phrase goes away. And we know from a lot of research that it not only helps boost revenues, but that it also importantly helps boost morale and productivity. So that's what social enterprise means. I'm really looking forward to seeing the pitches today and take it back to you, Will.
Wonderful. Thank you. I love that distinction. Priya, let's turn to you next.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here, and good to see a lot of people who I've spent time with at Rostandi and Booth over the years. I manage an impact investment fund at Impact Engine here in Chicago, and have spent all of my career as an institutional investor across asset classes with an impact lens, backing new strategies, new managers, and new companies as they go about trying to generate financial returns as well as measurable social impact. I agreed to a large extent with Manish, and that my hope is, my first of all belief is that all businesses are having some type of impact, both positive and negative. And over time, that word kind of means less as a black and white label because everyone has to do it. But I do believe that ultimately what a social enterprise is slightly nuanced in that there's a real intention, not to just manage the impact that could happen from your business operations, but really deliberately build your business in a way to meaningfully solve some social or environmental issue, and making certain business decisions about the way you design your product, how you price it, where you sell it, how you manage the experience, all of that intentionality around, I want to solve this issue and I'm making these decisions in this way to meet that objective. And, going through that gray area of figuring out, well, how will this affect, all these other variables in terms of, market share, in terms of growth, in terms of margins, and balance that with whatever your objectives are. And so it's great to see at Polsky and Rostandi so many enterprises that have come about and being supported with the nuance that each one brings. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Ken, let's turn to you.
I'd like to also add my thanks for participating. So I've spent the last 25 years in healthcare private equity, co-founded a healthcare private equity firm that's now known as BPOC, which is investing out of its fifth fund. And healthcare is, or should be when it is behaving best, somewhat of a social enterprise and should create social impact. And you can't be in healthcare without having that social mission in mind, charity care, deploying technology, devices, pharmaceuticals in parts of the world and in populations that can't afford to pay for them. There are a lot of disparities in society today. I think the disparities are creating this moment in time, or a big part of this moment in time we're in. I don't need to say more about that. We've been here before. We were here 50 years ago. We'll always be here until we've solved all the disparities. ESG is very important. Boards are spending a lot of priority time on this. And I'll tell you, investors are spending a lot of time. Wealthy people are spending a lot of time thinking about where to do their bit. And I'll share one quick anecdote. If you haven't read the book Bad Blood about Theranos, read it. It'll be an absolutely fascinating read. You won't be able to put it down. It talks about the good and the bad in social investing. Theranos was able to actually raise a lot of money from a lot of smart people who viewed it as a social impact investment. And I think it could have been, but for some of the issues they had with truthfulness. So thrilled to be here and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, one of our illustrious SNVC alums, Andrea.
Hi there. Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to hear the pitches. And so I'm one of the co-founders of Luminade. It's been a while since we got going. It's actually 10 years since we came up with the idea for our invention. And then I guess, 8 years since we were in the SNVC. We make portable solar lighting for humanitarian aid and then also camping and outdoor recreation. And as far as like commenting on the topic at hand, I mean, I think the other judges kind of hit the note that was in my head a little bit about just wondering like, why is social impact even the subset of entrepreneurship? And because for me, if I think about it, and also having sort of had the benefit of like not only being involved in things like SNVC over the years, but seeing, pitches and other like judging rounds of the competition, for example, the topics being covered are fairly universal in nature. And so it's very rare that something isn't like covering something like healthcare, education, or in Luminade's case, energy. And I think for me, it's all about like focusing on, when you focus on solutions in these areas, it seems pretty inevitable that it's actually something that serves a universal need and therefore is a solution for many types of situations. And so I just think that if anything, even though social entrepreneurship and social impact tends to be treated as a subset, if you look at it from the other direction, I actually think it's addressing typically, far bigger needs than, I guess, some other forms of businesses out there.
That's fantastic. I want to turn back to Priya and Ken quickly as sort of the investor voices on the panel here today. I think if we turn back to, again, Milton Friedman's definition of the role of a corporation and thinking about profit and purpose, there's an adage that if you chase two birds, you'll catch neither. As investors, I presume you see some opportunities in impact businesses that more quote unquote traditional enterprises may lack. And again, we've talked about whether there should even be this distinction, but inevitably there must be some trade-offs between profit and purpose as you're thinking about how a business builds and manages its operations. So I'm curious, from an investor perspective, as you're looking at a potential company to invest in, how do you think about navigating those potential trade-offs between profit and purpose, or do they not exist?
Sure, yeah. I think there are two main dimensions that I look at when I'm trying to determine is there a trade-off and what it is. The first is the addressable market. And I think a lot of societal environmental issues, the addressable market is enormous. In fact, that's why I believe impact investors can have an advantage and that they're addressing these huge issues that are relevant for large portions of our population. But certain companies and enterprises are targeting a certain community or a certain region or a certain group of people that is smaller. And so that can affect the ultimate market size. The second thing is pricing. And are you strategically pricing something lower in order for it to be accessible to these communities? And that can obviously affect the overall enterprise value as well. And I think it's important for investors to just be honest about that, because even if those answers are, yes, it's a smaller addressable market, and yes, it's a lower price, it still doesn't mean that it's necessarily a trade-off with your return, because there are two other factors that we always have to remember. One is, how are you building the business to manage that? You can still have high margins at a low price, depending on how you're building the product and designing it and the scale. And the second thing is, as an investor, what price are you paying? Right? And so valuation and thinking about ultimately how you're structuring things, you can still end up with a market rate return that is highly impactful on a small addressable market if those other factors are managed. And I must also just say that I do think a lot of impact investors don't necessarily bring that critical thinking. And so they end up with subpar returns, not because the impact was so high and they were willing to trade it off, but they just weren't sophisticated enough to really understand that nuance. So that's kind of how we view it at Impact Engine. We focus on areas where we can generate market rate or competitive returns, but we also believe that we can have deep impact, not touching all communities and every issue, but there are these areas which are large market opportunities, large enough addressable markets, and we can kind of support a business model that can be quite profitable.
Fantastic. And Ken, I think, Priya brought up pricing, and to me, particularly within healthcare, this is often where the impact question sort of rubber hits the road. Curious how you think about that. And is it just a time horizon question? What else are you thinking about in evaluating opportunities?
Well, I would say that we have a saying in healthcare that usually the best medicine is the most cost effective. People say, well, boy, you have to go to a hospital and it's this expensive, really prevention. And it sounds like I'm getting off track, but I think I'll come back around. Preventive medicine, which is cost effective, is the best medicine. It avoids what you call the train wreck, the technical term, hospital experience when you've really gotten bad. So really where healthcare is focused now is in delivering, the kind of pricing, if you will, and the kind of interventions that are more cost effective, can be afforded by more people, and therefore it can prevent the very high cost events that seem to disparately affect certain segments of the population. To answer, to your question, I think for example, take pharmaceuticals and research and discovery. You have to look at a worldwide market where some countries are going to pay you less and some countries are going to pay you nothing or very little. Unfortunately, that's been latched onto as a lightning rod issue that I don't think people fully understand, but also there are some issues with it. So I think in summary, what I'd say is I agree with Priya. You can be an attractive investment opportunity and still be socially conscious. And I think in some cases, and Priya, please don't forgive me for saying this, in some cases, investors are willing to take a little haircut. They're not willing to give up their money. They're not willing to see something really bad happen, like with Theranos. But I happen to know an investor who put 9 figures into Theranos, and a key part of their objective was, I don't need to make my 20% net like I do in private equity if this helps change the world.
That's a great point. I'll try to return to this continuum of capital question in a minute. I want to turn to our operators and entrepreneurs now. Manish and Andrea, as folks who have built and worked on creating businesses that are trying to manage this. Curious what advice you would give aspiring social entrepreneurs, whether those pitching today or anyone in the audience, about how as an operator you're thinking about finding that balance between financial and social return.
So for me, Will, the way, at least if I look back at the experience at AlphaSmart, which was the first company that started my entrepreneurial journey, we were fortunate to take it public. It got acquired by a public company. The way we thought of it is, first of all, to just get product market fit, that is between the users and the product. And once we got validation for that, it was a keyboard that helped school children basically for typing, keyboarding, word processing. The next step was then going back to an earlier point that has been raised, to bring that product, it was a hardware product, at the lowest sort of price point as possible, so that we could actually then make it affordable for a very large group rather than a subset. In doing all of that, I think it was important, if I go back and think about first principles, to make sure that the business would be sustainable. So we weren't thinking of it as a non-profit, it was a for-profit, clearly. It had to be sustainable for us to invest in future product development and growth and so on and so forth. The social impact, I would say, was actually the first objective, because the entire product was about trying to make hardware and keyboarding and note-taking affordable for a large group of school children. But we'd never thought of it as a trade-off between social and financial. The way we looked at it is just create a good product that actually has great validated need, and then grow it profitably, because once you do that, you can actually make the product, and the product actually dropped in price. As a small example, from year one, when we introduced it, about $270 per keyboard, down to $150 in a matter of about 8 years. And separately, a macro point that I'd like to make is going back to some research that has been done by Professors Sisodia and others. It is clear that companies that actually focus on goals other than just financial goals significantly outperform the S&P. And this research shows that between 2002 and 2011, this set of companies and he has a specific group that significantly outperformed it. So I don't think it is either social or financial returns. I think it, again, can be both.
Great. And Andrea, I'd love, maybe it would be helpful just to give a bit of background on sort of Luminade's business model. I think it's an interesting example of sometimes, particularly with social ventures, customers and beneficiaries might not necessarily be the same. How you thought about building the business model for Luminade?
I wish I had such a clear answer to that, because quite frankly, it changes almost like with every, even disaster or type of disaster, whatever it is of the day that we're responding to. But in general, I mean, we're a very active e-commerce business. So that's the consumer side. And then the B2B side is working with multinational NGOs. But then we've also come up with a lot of programs that almost combine the two. We have a version of our website where small nonprofits can buy lights, smaller quantities of lights at a very, very deep discount. And for us, it's kind of a win-win because like they get what they need. And we also streamlined it all through leveraging what we already knew how to do in e-commerce, for example. And so like we try to make it work, I guess, wherever we can to, I guess, create or come up with and or service the type of program that might work for whatever customer or channel that customer is in. But beyond that, I mean, I think one of the things in thinking about also listening to everyone else's kind of comments, I mean, I 100% agree with just this product market fit assessment. And then once you kind of like find something that works for whoever it is that's supposed to be using your product, if it's universal enough, inevitably it will have kind of like that implied social impact. And that's more like product and customer out, or even like investor, like, you know, almost like outside stakeholders. But I think about even just in terms of like Luminade's, I guess, trajectory as a company that is outwardly committed to and communicates our social mission. I think it's also just been helpful in so many other ways. For example, even just my team. I mean, I think we've been very lucky to attract really good people. And I myself, I don't know that I've been the best at articulating what our values are, but by having it sort of just implied with the front-facing side of the business, I think we've attracted a lot of people, good talent that like care, and that's really important on a whole set of levels, not just working with charities, for example, even just working with each other. And so it was kind of like a free, I guess, billboard or something for me to attract, I think, good talent and keep them and retain them. And I think, like so many things, I think one of the things I've learned is like, in terms of the question about margin and impact, and is there a trade-off? Or even like the fact that I think if you encourage less turnover in a business and like keep your team sort of like engaged, if you look at it one level, you could look at like the financial statement and say like, okay, I'm selling all this stuff at a discount. This is hurting my margins. I think you could look at it that way, sure. But I think you may miss out on taking it one level up to say like, okay, what we're doing here, for example, is putting out more product in the world and it's bringing in business in other ways. Or like my team is just generally happy because they're committed and motivated, and that's saving me time, cost, money, trouble in other areas. So I think that that's one thing that I would encourage everybody to think on, is just like take it one level up, and you may see that there's actually like hidden actual real business returns in what you're doing as a social impact company.
That's fantastic. I love that. And yeah, I think this product market fit question has been brought up a number of times. So it's wonderful. And I think, you know, it's really important to say it's not just about building a cheap product. It's about building a product people actually want to use, and figuring out the most affordable way to deliver that, I think is so important. So, you know, as we've referenced today, I think more and more people are talking about the role of private capital and innovation in solving social issues. I'm curious if folks have thoughts on, are there fields, are there industries, are there elements of the industry that are not being talked about today that you wish received more attention?
I'll say that one element of the field that is, I think, just beginning to receive more attention is also the structure of the business. So years ago, people started talking about, you know, B Corps, and benefit corporations, actually changing your corporate charter to explicitly, you know, be explicit with investors about your social goals. And more recently, and we've been spending some time here and making some investments in this space, but investing explicitly in employee-owned firms through co-ops and ESOP structures to create, you know, essentially, in addition to whatever product you're selling, the impact from that, but really help address this structural, not just income inequality, but wealth inequality gap in our country. And that's something that I think is kind of ripe for social entrepreneurs as well as impact investors to embrace, and can become quite mainstream and quite normal, and have benefits for non-impact investors as well. So we're very excited about that.
You know, I would just put a giant ditto behind what Priya just said. I think income inequality is something that we're learning more and more about. I hadn't realized until I saw some recent data from University of Chicago, that income mobility really has slowed down in this country. And that's something that I've always thought was something that made us and distinguished us as a country. So, and I hadn't really thought that you could do some of this through the corporate structure. ESOPs have been around a long time. So I would echo that. Improving training and income mobility or ownership.
I think, go ahead, sorry. Will, did you have a question?
It looked like you were ready to speak, so go ahead.
So I think sometimes we underestimate the importance of government's role in all of this in terms of research, programs, partnerships they do, because they put an enormous amount of investment. You know, one can argue whether some of it is done with the right ROI or the wrong ROI, but you know, I can point to programs that have far-reaching consequences, like including research that they do through DARPA that leads to a host of different innovations or improvements, or you know, across the board in childcare programs that then helps early education or elementary education and families. So there are things that the government does that I think we need to, at least in countries where the government is reasonably functioning well, that is really trying to do its part and helping. So I think we need to acknowledge that, and without that, it would be even harder. And the second thing I would say about, you know, sort of imbibing social as an entrepreneur is it's just like culture. It's living and breathing it. It's not something that you just write on a wall and say, these are the points that I'm going to follow. Yes, that may help remind you, but like culture, it's fluid. It must be lived and breathed. Otherwise, it's not very utilitarian. And ultimately, I think this awareness of inequality, to the points that Priya and Ken have already brought up, I think at least more and more people are becoming aware, which I think is a good thing, about how are we compensating highly paid people versus the median person in even large organizations. And does that even pass the smell test, you know? And if it doesn't, at least more and more research like this and transparency itself, I think, is a very useful thing. And then that's how I feel that these things are building in maybe in small ways, but really helping the overall goal.
Andrew, anything you would add to that?
Actually, yeah, I mean, I think I agree with like all of the comments stated about that. And I definitely just feel that the role of business, I mean, I think more than ever has a larger place. I think about even some of the like recent events with Black Lives Matter, and even just as a team, we've been talking about what more can we do? And it includes even just like voting with your dollars. And we're a very small company. I think if everyone starts thinking that way, we'll start bridging so many more of the gaps than that are normally sort of just not at the table in terms of conversation. In the conference room, for example, they've been relegated for, I guess, as some other people mentioned, far too long in the like government policy room, I guess. I don't know exactly. They have conference rooms too, but I think you get the idea, but yeah.
Yeah, and Manish, I'm so glad you brought up the role of government in the public sector. And I certainly don't want folks to walk away from this thinking that it is purely the role of entrepreneurs and private business to solve these, intractable issues in our society. I think it's incumbent on philanthropy, it's incumbent on government. There are, better regulations that all of these bodies need to work together in order for us to really make meaningful progress on any of these issues. So I'm glad you brought that up, particularly because that I started my career working in government and have seen, a lot of very talented people working there, even though they are much maligned, I think, in today's society. I'll also just give a quick plug for folks who are more interested in longer conversation about this sort of role of addressing social inequality. The Rostandi Center is starting a speaker series on some of these questions, thinking about how we actually innovate for better social equity, looking at the role of these different players, from philanthropy to private markets to larger corporations. So first event is on September 29th. We can definitely share more, and there will be more information on the Rostandi Center's website for folks who are interested in learning more. Obviously we could talk about these issues for hours, and I think we've covered a lot of ground in 30 minutes already. And with the few minutes remaining, I do want to talk about sort of this continuum of capital question that came up. And I think particularly for social ventures, again, whether you're for-profit or nonprofit, there often are different tranches of capital that can be accessed to build a business with different sort of trade-offs, right? There is non-dilutive financing from philanthropy, from government, potentially in the form of research. There's the more traditional venture private equity dollars. I'm curious, I guess I'll start, Andrew, maybe with you, thinking about, as a business owner, thinking about how you build a business quickly. There are various ways that you can access capital to build a business. How do you think about the trade-offs between these different bodies and sort of what you're giving up relative to the growth you want to see as a business owner?
Let me think about this. I never feel fully qualified to answer this question because we had so much non-traditional funding, whether it was like through SMBC or, we're just lucky, to be honest, or things like Shark Tank. But I think one thing in terms of I think if I were to sort of start from day one and think through financing, and then also even just traditional investors, I guess Mark Cuban is a good example of that. I would just make sure to have a very tight, know yourself and what your framework is for the level of fit and flexibility you need to do what it is you're setting out to do. And so by that, I mean, even Mark Cuban, for example, bringing it full circle when you ask, can you define Luminade's programs? And I'm I wish I had the super concise answer, but sometimes it changes depending on what we're doing. He's a great fit for that. He's super open-minded and is very open to just encouraging the company to commit to what it is that they want to do. So whether it's individual investors, institutional, organizational, or even people you're taking non-dilutive funding from, to make sure that the values really align before you take on certain types of funding. Because I think just long-term, it's just going to be easier to sort of set out to do what it is that you wanted to do. And hopefully that's how they feel about it too.
Fantastic. Anyone want the last word on this question of how to think about these trade-offs?
I can just, as an entrepreneur, we have raised capital. I must say I've never raised it through grant, so I don't have much experience there. And I think Andrea's comments are actually quite telling. And I would actually encourage people to talk to people like her to get advice on how to do that better. But we have raised from a lot of early stage VCs, including some really amazing investors such as Reid Hoffman from Greylock, Matt Kohler from Benchmark, Albert Wenger from Union Square, from later stage, and these are different companies, later stage players such as Summit Partners, and then finally in a public offering, so raising money from actually in the IPO itself. And at least from my point of view, the real question was not about dilution. Yes, of course, it ultimately comes down to that and how much are you giving up and what are the numbers. But just as we have this product market fit, I think it's pretty important to have the fit between the investor and whether you want to call it company or company and founders. And that chemistry is particularly important when you go through the inevitable ups and downs that a startup will. So the dilution or the dilutive part is, to me, as an entrepreneur, definitely secondary, because most people, reputable investors are not there to screw you. They're not going to try to basically squeeze out and say, oh, I want whatever, 35% if the industry standard is something else. So I'm really less concerned about that. So my advice for the group is that as they're fundraising, particularly from these sources, that they think about more the fit and the investors. And I'll end with what one of our investors, Albert Wenger, said from Union Square, said that in the end, money has no smell. And he came up with some Latin phrase for it, which I can't recall. I'm sure we can Google it. But that's true too. In the end, as an entrepreneur, if you need to raise money, you first line up money. And if then you pick which investor fits your chemistry, and then you go with whatever is sort of the best combination of that.
Fantastic.
Just a real quick add-on to what Andrea said. I think the family offices are good sources because alignment of values is real crucial. And I know we don't have much time, so I'll stop there.
Fantastic. Well, I think the hardest part of doing a virtual event like this is that we can't all give a round of applause to the amazing judges who've been here. But I just want to thank all of you for a very insightful yet brief conversation. And again, encourage the attendees to network with our presenters after the fact. And I'll now turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Chrissy Ritter, who's going to manage the pitch portion of the program.
Thank you, Will. Great job on the panel today. I can't imagine a more wonderful person moderating. We appreciate you. All right, everyone. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. Our accelerator teams are going to be giving 5-minute pitches today, followed by 5 minutes of Q&A from our judges. And with that, we will kick off with Sprout. Alana, feel free to share your screen and get us started.
Okay, thank you, Chrissy. All right, bear with me for a second. All right, is that clear to everybody?
It's wonderful.
Okay, perfect. So hi, everyone, we're Sprout, and we offer philanthropic education services connecting donors with advisors who have topic expertise in a variety of impact areas. So we're doing this for the 6 million Americans who give upwards of $20,000 in charitable donations every year. And these are people, who the initial joy of giving is really high, but is often tempered by that concern about the impact they're really making with those dollars. So 81% of major donors report that concern today. And these are real folks, just like JJ. So JJ works in tech. When I met him, JJ was looking to go deeper into his giving towards STEM education, but he was doing it on his own, which was challenging and frustrating. So thankfully, I met JJ through word of mouth and was able to walk with him along that journey as an informal philanthropic consultant. But that marketplace is underground and isn't really available to everybody. For most donors, the best personalized support is too expensive and is frankly goes above and beyond what they truly need. So that's where Sprout steps in to expand the marketplace of philanthropic education services. To explain how we're doing that, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Sahana.
To better fulfill this gap that we've identified in this industry, we've created Sprout, which is the first platform connecting donors to philanthropic advisors who can help make every dollar count. And so we can better understand how Sprout works by walking through the journey of Eliza, who's a donor who's very interested in looking at COVID relief impact funds. As you can see in this first wireframe, she inputs the location of her project that she's interested in and answers a lot of questions on a Sprout survey. And ultimately, Sprout provides her with a list of advisors who match her exact needs. So these advisors range from think tank experts all the way to community leaders, people who know the field well and can help Eliza reach her goals. After reading through these advisor bios and the reviews, as you can see in the second wireframe, she ultimately picks Denise and is able to book an appointment for her. However, Eliza's relationship with Denise isn't just a one-time relationship. It's a repeated long-term conversation to really help her meet the impact she wants to make. From Denise's perspective, Sprout is a wonderful opportunity to take her expertise and catalyze social change by connecting to donors who have that same interest in that topic of expertise. The way that we're able to curate this trustworthy marketplace is through a careful 4-step vetting process. So through detailed interviews with the Sprout team, as well as Sprout actively monitoring these reviews by donors, we're able to ensure that the quality of advice is up to our promised standard. I'll turn it over to Jaden to talk a little bit more about how Sprout's impact exceeds just this donor-advisor relationship.
Yes, due to the new connections that donors will have with advisors through Sprout, they will be able to optimize their social impact that they've often been seeking. First and foremost, there will be better connections with nonprofits, so it'll unlock more giving. The advisor's unique expertise will foster strategic decision-making, and donors will be introduced to underrepresented nonprofits. I'll turn over to Nikki for financials.
Thanks, Jaden. We are a mission-based nonprofit with a strong revenue generation pipeline. We're expanding city by city, specifically targeting urban areas with high concentration of major gift givers. We're confident that targeting donor circles and advisors on a limited set of topics like post-COVID relief will help create a robust marketplace. By following a B2C channel strategy, we expect to break even by 2024 with 6,000 active users spread across 4 US locations. Let's take an example. A typical scenario with an advisor involves understanding donors' needs and accomplishing a few milestones, mission statement, prospects list, etc. We believe that these tasks should not take more than 4 to 5 hours. Our pricing model will cost the donor about $400 annually. With a donor lifetime of 4 years, we forecast our business model to have a high LTV to CAC ratio. Meanwhile, the contribution margin of 40% will help us scale towards becoming a self-sustaining nonprofit.
So today what we're looking for is to catalyze this marketplace, connections to philanthropic advisors and donors, as well as advisory board members. And we're the team to do it. So like I said, we have a wealth of philanthropic expertise, as well as in-house software and technology expertise to build the platform. With that, I'll just say, now is the time to make this difference. With COVID, charitable giving is on the rise like never before, and we are working to make every dollar count in this critical time. With that, I'll say thank you and open it up to any questions that you have.
Great work, team. All right, judges, please feel free to raise your hands, and then Sprout will call on you for Q&A. I think Priya has the first question, Alana.
Priya, yes. Hi,
great job. Familiar with the need here, and I think you're right on the timing and the impact you can have right now. Maybe this is a biased view, but I often feel like the most catalytic organizations, nonprofit or for-profit, are categorically viewed as high risk. And if you're using philanthropic advisors who are trying to de-risk, for their customers and clients, how are you ensuring that you're not actually perpetuating the issue of the largest philanthropic dollars going to the lowest risk and lowest impact areas and organizations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's different perspectives held by different advisors, but I will say, there's a big trend amongst philanthropic advisors to look more holistically at those questions and start to recommend, the minority-led organizations that are typically overlooked, or to recommend portfolio approaches where if you're trying to do STEM education, maybe you want to be partly in policy change and partly in, at-risk youth, and, to kind of create a concerted strategy. So it's trying to help donors to think about all of those nuances to get out of, just donating to the well-known brand names. Yeah, and going based on metrics.
Thank you.
I also see Manish.
Thank you. Again, this is really interesting. In any two-sided marketplace, you obviously, I'm sure, know that you need to build up enough sort of liquidity between the demand side and the supply side. So couple of related questions. What is your target in terms of how many donors do you think you will have in the first 12 months? And how are you going to go about getting the number of advisors as well? So on each side of the equation. And the last part is, it looks like COVID is really the first sort of locus of where you begin. And then from there, because in most marketplaces, you have to start really, it's small and then broaden. So first question is, how are you going to get the donors? How are you going to get the, obviously the advisors? And the third question is where do you make that match or the liquidity happen?
Yep. Nikki, do you actually want to take this one?
Sure, I can. So 1 second, I'm so sorry. Yes. So what we expect to have is, like, within the first year, about 25 donors to start off with within 2020. As we scale to 2021, like scale it to grow to about like 150 donors. And correspondingly, with respect to the number of advisors who will be helping these donors, we assume like they would spend about 10 hours per week or for week to kind of like help out these donors as in ongoing basis, and overall scaling up to like 30 to 40 hours per month. So as their relationship kind of like grows, they would kind of like dedicate more time towards the platform. But we want to start off small and kind of like go ahead with the scaling strategy after.
Yeah, I'll add on to that and say, COVID's kind of convenient because it's finally a shared topic that's, common amongst donors in every metro area. And it's encompasses health, education access, economic opportunity. And so it's a good way to get a lot of donors in there to kind of grow into those other adjacencies as well. Ken, did you have a
Great.
question?
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah,
Alana.
thanks, Chrissy. I spend a lot of my time on charitable and civic boards, and for us, we spend a lot of time trying to demonstrate outcomes and results. It seems to me, and by the way, great presentation. Your revenue model, your business model is very clear, but it seems to me a big question is how far do you intend to take the recommendation? Because ultimately, just saying, you know, the group's out there and it fits your preferences of donating. You know, I think people are looking for maybe a little more than that, particularly if they're in the sophistication level of having that much money to invest. And then secondly, and kind of just related to that, well, I'll stop there.
Okay, yeah, I can take that one.
Sorry, I actually had the thought.
Go ahead.
It's a little bit off the other what was raised previously. The very large organizations are easy to spot. Sometimes the people doing the best work are the smaller ones. So that's kind of the tack on. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I wholeheartedly agree with you, Ken. So we're really trying to, you know, take those diamonds in the rough and kind of find the folks who are topic area experts. I think the example we gave is, you know, someone who works with the city government in Chicago specific on economic development issues. That person knows who's out there in Chicago, the small nonprofits, everything, and can help connect donors to all of those hidden gems. In terms of how far the relationship goes, I think that really will depend on the donor. You know, some donors, you're right, they'll get the recommendation and may or may not act upon it, but it is their, you know, to their discretion. But we're hoping to really foster a secure and sort of trustworthy place where they can build that relationship and start to become, you know, more and more into strategic philanthropy. It's trying to change from charity to philanthropy, really.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alana. Thank you, Sprout. Great work, team.
Thanks, Chrissy.
Thank you very
Our
much.
next accelerator team will be Leved. Hector, please feel free to share your screen and get us started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leved. We are an edtech that develops what we call predictors of success in Latin American schools. We're very excited to share with you our vision of transforming education in Latin America. We're still at a very early stage, so hopefully we can bring some of you on this journey along with us. Leved exists because opportunity is not at everyone's reach. Schools are not preparing their students for success. We live in a world where the internet has democratized information, but not opportunity. The rapid advancement of technology is making the future of work hard to predict. We don't know what the jobs of the future will look like, but what we do know for sure is that a significant portion of the population is on the brink of becoming irrelevant. Schools in Latin America have failed to update the way they think about preparing students for the real world. At Leved, we believe that preparedness is no longer about knowledge acquisition nor teaching to the average student. Rather, it is about developing a universal and readily available toolkit that will help future generations seize and create their own opportunities. Ask young adults about how their education prepared them for the real world. They will most likely tell you that they had to unlearn what they thought they knew and that they had to figure out things themselves. So what are these predictors of success we're talking about? Much research shows that skills in the domains of emotional intelligence, attention management, problem solving, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity are strong predictors of success in today's labor market. Moreover, there are tools that foster healthy and happy relationships. We learned a lot this summer. We made significant progress in designing and testing some of our educational experiences. We learned that the development of these skills in kids require much more than just teaching their components and reinforcing their importance. Rather, it is a system-wide effort that aims to develop them first in teachers and then in kids. We built modules on emotional intelligence and attention management for adults and critical thinking on kids. As of now, our experiences are offered only upon invitation and can be accessed through any device with an internet connection. Our close community is helping us iterating user experience and measuring preliminary outcomes.
Hello, everyone. Let's talk a little bit about Latin America. It is a region with over 60 million elementary school children, which are spread across more than 30 countries. As diverse as they are, there are relevant common features to all of the countries in the region. Same language, similar tech habits, and importantly, a context where governments are pushing for the introduction of such skills in curricula, and schools struggling with accomplishing that. And then on top of that, schools are having to adapt to a new world. and now more than ever are thinking about how to innovate their curricula and how to leverage tech in doing that, while being very mindful of whether these improve students' experience and their short and long-term outcomes. Again, outside of the traditional classroom settings. And we believe that these predictors of success that Hector has just talked about have the potential to bring a positive change regarding that. Therefore, we feel that now is as relevant a time as ever to pursue our aspirations. In keeping our pursuit, we're moving forward by, first, running a proof of concept. We've had great empirical evidence that our experiences are already changing lives, both in terms of user feedback and according to our own measurements. Nevertheless, we still need to test for significant scientific evidence that our experiences can effectively have a positive effect at scale. Second, by keeping building our community. We believe that educating, fostering, and enabling a community of parents, kids, and educators that can promote and develop these skills is what will effectively allow us to maximize our impact, while giving us a sustainable competitive advantage in the long term. We also want to expand our portfolio of experiences. We did not dive into all of the success skills yet, and there is also a lot of room to deepen and scale the ones we already have. And finally, we will also initiate our efforts of reaching out to schools and partnering with them. They're not only our target customers, they are the catalyst for us to reach the other 3 steps. They have the students and the scale for a proof of concept. They're a big part of the existing community infrastructure around education, and they are the ones we want to have close by when developing new experiences. Well, knowing our next steps and what separates us today from that, we have a simple ask. We want to be connected with talent. We're looking for people that can bring specific knowledge in software engineering, product development, and pedagogical knowledge, either as partners or as mentors. Hector and I have, in our own rights, been exposed to the harsh realities that are common across Latin America. We are well aware that we are able to be here today because we're the exception, not the rule, in terms of the opportunities and privileges that we've had. These opportunities are mostly a function of our education, and that is why we believe and are deeply passionate about it. So we truly believe in education's potential to change lives, and we hope you all believe in that too. Thank you all, have a great day, and we will now open for questions.
Great work, Laved. Our judges, you're welcome to start raising your hands. I think Manish is up with the first question, team.
Thank you, Hector and Felipe. Quick question on the model itself, the predictive model. Where do you plan to get the data for that model in order to then make the predictions that you need to? And then the second part, which is unrelated, is you talked about a plan to go to schools. How would you go about going to schools? Whether and which countries would you first focus on?
Those are very good questions. Thank you, Manish. On the first one, we're getting data with our own measurements with our platform. Already MVP, we're collecting data and analyzing them. Yet we understand that we have to have some rigorous scientific evidence around our outcomes. So we're planning to roll out a proof of concept pilot in the second half of this year, starting this fall, with schools that we already have contacts to partner with, and launch a actual pilot that we can measure. On which schools and which market, we want to start in Mexico. And in fact, we have already started in Mexico. We have already started having users both for adults and kids in Mexico, where we can leverage that. And our go-to-market strategy regarding schools, we have found from analog edtechs that have entered the school market that the best way to do it is just to bring forward what people perceive to be the top performing schools and have them as partners. And then expanding that, our offering through other schools, it becomes easier. So that would be our strategy.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I see Priya Parish.
Hi, can you share more about the competition, and are there other folks trying to solve this issue in Latin America with maybe similar or maybe quite different models for how to reach students and how to teach these skills?
Of course, yeah. On the adult educator side, the competition comes from a wide variety of certificators. What we have found by talking with school directors is that teachers are overwhelmed with certifications. They are going through certifications all the time and they are kind of exhausted. The good thing about our experience is that it's designed to not to interrupt the day-to-day lives. And on the lower, like kids segment, one big competitor that we have, it's called a Ruler, which is part of Yale's Emotional Intelligence Research Center. They have a somewhat prohibitive pricing point for Latin America, and they do their engagements as in just for a period of time. They don't stay for them they sort of certificate also the workforce, not develop the skills, foster the development of skills in an ongoing basis, among others, of course.
Okay, great. Do we have any additional questions?
Yeah, we have
Andrea, I think has one.
Yes, sorry. I mean, this is sort of a bigger picture question also just for context, like in terms of the landscape of education in the countries that we're talking about, is there a certain breakdown between like public and private? And then also I was wondering if there's something that you all are thinking in advance about if you have students that come from, or people that come from so many different backgrounds of even just what they can afford. I guess, how are you thinking through blending all of these things into one service or product?
So do you want to take this one?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for your question, Andrea. So we have on the presentation now the ratio of public to private enrollment, student enrollment in a series of countries in Latin America. We do have strong connections with social sector entities, particularly in Mexico, and we intend to leverage these partnerships to actually promote our products and our experiences to communities that don't have the purchasing power or the accessibility required to develop these sorts of abilities. So that's one way that we're trying to leverage our connections in Mexico in terms of how do we expand our reach to people that cannot access it. And yes, that's it. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, team. Great job, Lived. We appreciate you. All
Thanks.
right, next up, we have Safe Legal Aid.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Eamon Keenan. I'm the founder of Safe Legal Aid. We're a 501c3 nonprofit creating an online legal education platform designed to help those who can't afford to hire a private attorney with family law legal issues, such as child support or child custody. Family law is a subset of civil law, which, unlike criminal law, is a legal domain where no one is guaranteed the right to an attorney. In the US, it's estimated that 71% of low-income households experience at least one civil legal problem each year, and there are over 60 million Americans belonging to these households. In Chicago, like many other cities, there exists a multitude of free and low-cost family law legal service providers, but each one is only able to address a particular set of legal problems. This creates an impossible marketing challenge for providers. How can consumers who are not attorneys themselves know which provider to go to for legal help? This is where SAFE comes in. Based on my experience managing intakes for legal service providers, my team and I have developed a two-part solution to help ensure that all Chicago families have knowledge of the free and affordable legal resources available to them. First, the status quo for providing referrals digitally in Chicago is through Illinois Legal Aid Online. If a user inputs that they need help with, say, obtaining child support, Aleo lists every local provider that advertises child support services. But this is precisely the problem. Rather than asking the user critical questions, like whether they qualify to receive child support payments, they assume the user already knows. Instead, SAFE provides a self-help questionnaire through which users can diagnose their own core legal issue. All they have to do is answer a series of short questions written in plain language, and then we'll provide them with the most critical resources and information to streamline their path towards a legal remedy. This includes a list of local legal service providers that can address the user's specific issue, as well as unique recommendations like what documents they'll need to ensure that they are prepared to receive help from an attorney on the day they call or walk to the door. Carving our niche in the market by focusing on family law will allow us to retain a huge early mover advantage over comparable platforms. Replicating our models would be a massive investment for these organizations, as they would have to do so for all civil legal matters. Additionally, we believe it's crucial to recognize that the premise of an online legal education platform is inherently flawed, as it fails to account for the indigent populations without reliable internet access that need free legal help the most. To bridge this gap, we plan to recruit undergrad volunteers to visit homeless shelters, community centers, and other spaces around the city to provide these populations with access to our services. Non-lawyer participation of this nature is currently an emerging trend in legal services, but it generally follows a model we can improve on in two key respects. First, we want to find the people that need our help the most, rather than have them find us. And second, by using our technologies to guide the services our volunteers provide, we can significantly reduce the time required to train them. Our value proposition relies on a low maintenance website and a volunteer workforce, so our early stage cost structure will be very minimal. We will rely on donations and grants for revenue, but upon generating more brand credibility down the line, we can begin monetizing services by managing online intakes for legal service providers. For grants, we plan to target local legal service grant providers and private foundations in each state that we operate in, moving to our national grant providers as we further scale. We spent this summer accelerator speaking to leadership and attorneys from legal service providers, potential users, and more to refine our content, web design, and developmental strategy. If the COVID-19 pandemic permits, we plan to beta launch the site in October and start piloting the volunteer program around the city. We'll then officially launch in winter, expand statewide by spring, and then come summer make a decision to either keep scaling geography or expand our legal content. And SAFE is the team to get all of this done. The civil justice crisis has persisted for centuries. We believe that a fresh perspective from a passionate collective of young social change agents is needed to move forward on behalf of consumers. We're here today looking for advisors with either experience in nonprofit development or in the connection to the Chicago legal profession to help us bring SAFE to those that need us the most. Thank you very much for your time, and I'd be happy to take your questions.
Great work, Eamon. Judges, you're welcome to start raising your hands.
Okay, I see Ken.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. It was very helpful. Maybe more of a statement, but I want to know if you've thought about this. You know, the old saying, why do you rob banks? It's where the money is. I think taking money, you know, seems like taking money in your revenue model from the legal aid societies and groups might be a tougher sell. Have you thought about, you know, law firms generally have pro bono requirements and very active pro bono practices. Have you thought about that as a way to go to match folks up with firms, small and large, medium, for-profit firms?
Definitely. I mean, once we have connections with the people in the Chicago legal profession, that's definitely an avenue we're looking to take advantage of. And that's how comparable platforms generally model their revenue models. But we also do think that for legal service or grant providers, that they generally tend to earmark funds for actual legal service delivery, and then also for technology companies like us and for navigation programs similar to the volunteer program. So we hope that that will be a way to make sure that we're not detracting away from our value proposition because we're not taking away resources from those legal service providers. Manish?
Yeah, thanks, Eamon. For the folks that you are hoping to serve, the ones who are, say, do they have access to technology? How will they access your services?
Yeah, great question. So based on our studies and surveys, there's most of the people that will be using our site will be accessing from mobile devices, and many of them do have mobile devices. So we're making sure that our platform is mobile accessible for sure. And also we plan on using the volunteer program to provide access to those more disadvantaged populations. So during our pilot runs, and hopefully starting in October, we'll hopefully be able to find the places where these people are that need our help the most, that don't have access to an internet accessible device or things like that. Andrea?
Thanks for the presentation. And it's like I'm very excited about your idea. I think there's a lot of like use for making it easier to get some of this stuff done to help people using technology. I'm not an expert in this by any means, but I was just curious, is there anything in terms of like privacy that you have to think about in advance? Also in the context of some of these situations being a little bit sensitive, even like the people themselves may be afraid to sort of like reach out and share more information, I would think sometimes.
Definitely. Privacy issues are a huge concern, especially one kind of important things for making referrals is collecting some sort of sensitive demographic information about our users. So we want to be very upfront with our users that we're not going to be selling their data or anything like that. But having spoken to some ethics lawyers and people who specialize it, there are no very upfront privacy concerns that we have to kind of navigate around. But just for the sake of our users' sake of comfort and confidence when navigating our platform, we want to just be very clear about that that's not part of our business model. Ken, is that another hand raised?
It may be from previously.
Got it.
All right, do we have any additional questions? All right, oh, Manish is in.
Sorry, just a very quick one. So assuming the situation with COVID, which obviously puts challenges for any startup, any business, how would you go about sort of getting the first set of users, and just walk us through the next 6 months?
Sure. So we've started talking to aldermen and local state reps to kind of figure out, like, just to get a baseline sense for how their constituents information share and how they gain knowledge of these resources available. So a big thing will be digital marketing, of course, Google ad grants for nonprofits, and leveraging Facebook groups for different neighborhoods around Chicago, and also Facebook live streams for government officials, elected officials will be kind of our bread and butter there. But there are community service centers that are continuing to operate and having people, come in at a much lower volume to get referred to information and resources of this nature. So hopefully we'll be able to partner with some organizations to get piloting that part of the program so we can really find where the people that will use our services are located.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eamon. Great work today.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, Mickey, you're up next with AutoAlert.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Today, I'm presenting AutoAlert, an AI proctoring service for technical interviews. So before I get into it, a little bit about myself. I'm Mickey Friedman. I'm graduating this fall, and I'm an aspiring software engineer. Since coming to Chicago, I've had a few tech opportunities in tech. And for each of these roles, I've gone through 2 to 4 rounds of technical interviews, where a recruiter asks me a question, and I have to generate code for it on the spot. It's a space I know pretty well, and it's also a space that is pretty broken because candidates cheat. Companies recycle the same content, the same questions over and over again, and the solutions are posted online. Not only that, but there are companies whose businesses center around making the solutions as accessible and as easy to copy and paste for candidates as possible. This leads to really poor hiring decisions, which can lead to sunken costs and millions of dollars lost. So I decided to create AutoAlert, which is a solution that's like any other coding screen platform. However, it monitors users' behavior with facial detection and with screen analysis to make sure that you're not conferring with other sources that aren't a part of the program. If you do break the rules of the interview, the candidates will receive AutoAlerts. And if they break enough of them, it will be reported to the recruiter. I prepared a demo just to showcase the technology. If you want, you can lower your volumes a little bit because it is a little bit louder than the typical presentation.
So it all starts when you get the AutoAlert email that there's a test waiting for you. You click on it, and then you open your exam. The assessment will request access to your camera to perform facial recognition to ensure that you are the one taking the exam and that you are taking it honestly. Once you grant access, you can start answering questions. Now, this camera view will not be shown in the actual web page, but it will be displayed for the purpose of this demo. Notice how my facial landmarks are accurately being tracked. If I go off frame, I'll receive an auto alert. If I start texting my phone, I'll receive an auto alert. If I start talking off to the side, I will receive an auto alert. If I go to another tab, even if it's just to check in my email, I will receive an auto alert. Now let's see what's going on from the test maker's point of view. So I'm going to log in with my personal email. This is what the hiring team will see. Okay, now we're in the hiring manager's dashboard. As you can see, here are the candidates. They all scored 100. This was the student that we just tested who had all those violations. I sent it to my own email. As you can see, the auto alerts show up over here. They're time-stamped, and there are notifications for each one.
All right, end of demo. As you can see, the UI is pretty clean. It's really easy to share tests, and it's really easy to track them as well. So this is a large market, and it's growing larger every single year as jobs become more and more technical. Already there are 1.6 million engineers in the US, and that's not even counting data scientists and IT professionals. I've conservatively estimated that around 3 to 4 million technical interviews are conducted each year. And while not all of them, while some of them are in person, the ones that are not in person, that aren't monitored, do not hold the candidates accountable. This is sort of a landscape of AI proctoring services and code screening platforms. As you can see, there's not a lot of overlap between them. The AI proctoring services are not targeted towards technical interviews. They're targeted towards universities. Meanwhile, they don't offer code screen environments. HackerRank and CoderByte are favorites among the coder community, but they do not offer browser block or behavior analysis. So today, I just mainly wanted to showcase the technology. I recently pivoted from another idea, so I'm still validating my financial models and also my business plan, but I would love to be put in touch with advisors who've experience in working with hiring technology, and I would just love to hear your feedback on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mickey. All right, judges, you're welcome to come on video and raise your hands. I think you've got a few hands in the already raised, Mickey, so go ahead.
Oh, is this in participants or?
It is. I'll go ahead and get us started. Ken, why don't you go first?
Yeah, real simple question. I'm the least probably technologically sophisticated in this group, but what is the technology backbone here? Is it licensed? Developed? Can you tell me a little bit about it? Thank you.
Sorry, what do you mean about licensed technology?
Well, the technology that will read whether I turn my head or whether I click out of the screen and go to email. Where does that come from? Is it internally developed? And I know it's using my camera on my laptop. I've read that much, but
it's internally developed.
Okay. Does it exist, or is that part of what you would look to fund? It exists.
Yeah, that was I mean, I didn't want to do a live demo in case something went wrong, but yeah, that's what the product is.
Perfect, thank you.
So Chrissy, I actually don't think I can see the hands raised because
it's okay, I can help. Priya, why don't you go next?
Sure, thank you, Mickey. Can you articulate in more depth the social impact or problem that you're trying to solve and why?
So this was actually, it started off as an ed tech startup, which is I think the reason why I was put into this group today. I pivoted towards technical interviewing. So it's not really a social startup. It's basically just trying to keep candidates accountable while they're taking technical interviews to reduce the number of bad candidates that are accepted into certain programs.
All right, Manish, would you like to go next?
Yeah, congratulations on pivoting. This is something that most entrepreneurs do, so don't feel badly about it. I think it's a very, very common thing. I had a question, since this is born out of your own experience as a software programmer and the interviews you've gone through. How much do you think the other side cares about sort of how they proctor you during a live interview versus the code you've checked into Git and assessing the kinds of things you've already done rather than that 45-minute interview. And I'm just curious because you've interviewed with quite a few organizations and you've gone through it. But my sense is that often when my counterparts are doing interviews, technical interviews, of course, there's the live session, but they go and check a lot of stuff that they've already published, so to speak, or checked in.
Yeah, of course. Prior projects and, your education and past experience at companies are definitely considered. But it's when you're, starting out, I imagine this would be, used to recruit university students mostly. That would be the way that I start off. It's really difficult to evaluate candidates, especially when, you come from different educational backgrounds. And also it's so easy to put anything you want on a resume. You could, code in C just once, and then you can slap on C in your resume. It doesn't mean you actually will be a productive employee. So I do think that it matters in, creating this leveling ground for job candidates.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've certainly seen that in terms of what people put on resumes versus when you, the only other comment, this is not a question, is it seems like, these monitoring or proctoring solutions, there are some societies that are much more open to it than others. So there may be a privacy angle. Like, for example, I know in China, they do this even for children, young children, doing tutoring sessions to make sure that they're staying awake, or even in classrooms that they're paying attention, which if you were to try to do it here in the US in classrooms, especially for elementary school children, it would be a real problem. So that's something you may want to just think through, but I'll go offline now.
I'm thinking, just to address that, I'm thinking of removing the camera from behind the facial detection. So it would really, like, for example, instead of seeing my face and everything behind the camera, it'll only show like, that mask that I had on pretty much, to protect people's privacy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mickey. Great job today. Thank you, judges. All right, so next we've got our last but not least presentation of the day. We have our Living Waters team.
Hi, we're Living Waters, and it's a real privilege to be here. Today we're going to be showing you what a new era of sustainable water provision looks like. My name is Josh. I'll be joined by my colleagues Caleb, Joseph, and Gabrielle. When our teams first encountered refugee sites in South Asia and Latin America, we came across a recurring scene. Tens of thousands of families housed in these cramped relief shelter conditions, stretching out as far as one could see, each and every one of them lacking in the most basic of access to water and sanitation. So in the world today, NGOs, governments, and relief organizations literally commit billions of dollars that are sadly bottlenecked by unsustainable methods, often of manually transferring water provisions to off-grid settlements like this one here. So at Living Waters, we thought, couldn't we just be using the relief shelters we had been witnessing, capture all the rainwater that cascaded off of them, and then store that water away for whenever a family needed it? We then looked at current solutions. Turns out there are none being applied for the many millions of pitched housing we've been witnessing in such abundance. So after some iteration, we devised the Living Waters system. Living Waters, the world's first mass-produced suite of portable rainwater harvesting guttering units. We provide and preserve clean, potable rainwater right at the doorstep. To accomplish this, we harvest rainfall, the world's cleanest natural water source, utilizing a simple process whereby first a mesh guard blocks up all the larger detritus that amasses, while a sediment filter then eliminates all the smaller, finer particles. After that water recedes into the user's collapsible storage barrel and basic shock chlorination is applied, it can be used for a whole host of water-related purposes. Perhaps the single greatest attraction of our units are their elegant simplicity. Simple. Anyone can take advantage of their easy-to-use structure. Leveraging our first-to-world suspension design, the entire unit can be outfitted over the many millions of pitched housing commonly found in off-grid settlements like the ones you see pictured here. And what's more, the entire unit fits inside a standard student backpack. Weighing less than 5 pounds, it's also highly durable, lasting 3 to 8 years at minimum, even in severe weather conditions, with our sturdy, durable polytarp design. After unboxing, simply toss it over and tie it in place. It's just that simple.
We see our units on any pitched housing structure in the global refugee and off-grid market, including critical humanitarian markets in Latin America, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. In these places, living waters can provide over half of the family's UN recommended water needs. Our $60 price enables us to provide massive cost savings to NGOs and disaster relief agencies as well, helping them achieve the basic clean water standard for refugee settlements, a goal that 2/3 of them currently are unable to meet. Right now, in most of these camps, water is either trucked in long distance or provided by on-site boreholes. Both methods are prohibitively expensive.
Using these methods, an NGO will spend $4.2 million for an average sized camp over the first 5 years. With Living Waters, an NGO can reduce costs by 42%. That's $1.7 million saved. Still, refugee families are not the only ones who could benefit from our product. Nearly 830 million people around the world live in off-grid informal settlements, and they suffer from many of the same problems. Recently, we were able to run our first pilot in Rajasthan, India. This experience allowed us to field test our system on multiple different housing structures, along with giving us the opportunity to survey over 200 people in 7 different villages, providing valuable insight into their situation. Next year, we plan to run a pilot in Colombia, and we are asking for $195,000 to cover the cost of this pilot as well as a 1-year ramp-up period.
Now we are ready to test our system in a refugee environment. With the support from the Polsky Accelerator and Polsky Center, we will be able to demonstrate the viability of our product in new settings, collect key data on product utility and customer satisfaction, and establish new relationships on the ground. We recently partnered with the World Economic Forum's Global Shapers community. As a global shaper myself and a leader of one of the humanitarian projects, I oversee over 20 hubs in Latin America. This means we have access to an outstanding network of young global leaders that could help us introduce our product in their communities. And we believe we are the right team for this. Between the 4 of us, we have over 25 years of experience in the NGO, humanitarian, financial, startup, and marketing sector. And we invite you today to join us in the Living Waters missions of transforming the lives of millions by democratizing rainfall. Thank you very much.
Great work, team. All right, I think Ken has his hand up first, and then we'll let the judges come in with their hands raised.
Great presentation. Can you comment on the IP portfolio here, or have you filed for IP? Is there IP behind this? That's the question.
Oh yeah, thank you for the question. We have filed for a provisional patent and are going through some steps to transfer that into a fully fledged patent in the United States. That said, the IP question is something that we've mulled over quite extensively, and in the locations that we're servicing, they're not necessarily as honored as they would be in the United States. So we're relying heavily on our partnerships and our with humanitarian agencies and community leaders in the local vicinities where we serve to bolster our position.
Josh, can you see the hands, or do you want me to help?
I can see them.
Very great.
We have Ken. Oh wait, that was okay. Priya.
Hi, great job, really impressive. Maybe I missed this, I apologize, but can you share a little bit more about your structure, whether you're nonprofit, for-profit, and your kind of longer term goals in terms of where you want to take this company?
Yeah, absolutely. We are a for-profit social venture, and this is primarily because it enables us to go to scale a lot faster than if we were to opt for a more nonprofit format. Right now, through our pilot, we're mainly establishing our on-the-ground partnerships in order for us enable us to scale more profusely to other areas of the globe that are under the same purview of the organizations that we're currently in coordination with.
Great, thank you.
Manish.
Hey, I had the pleasure of meeting you guys at the SNVC challenge, so it's great to see you guys again. What has the progress been since that time when we sort of went through the previous presentation?
Yes, so mainly we've been working in the next pilot. We've reached people on the ground, but also experts that have been helping us in the future impact measurement of the unit. We also target a settlement to work in Colombia, and we're also exploring the option of testing the system in settlements in Venezuela because 89% of people suffer from water crisis. So we're still working on that because of the COVID crisis. It has been a little, we have that barrier right now to introduce the product in the pilot, but that's basically what we've been doing.
Andrea?
I mean, we've talked a little bit in the past, so it's nice to see you guys again. I think now that you guys have made so much progress in terms of your pilot, I was also just curious, you know, where your thoughts are headed next in terms of just even your like customer and business development. Who are you going to talk to next, and what are you going to tell them? It's my, you know, that's a very big picture question, but I'm just curious about like where your heads are at in terms of next steps about like speaking with NGOs and selling it.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Andrea. Part of our expansion plans also are with some of the research labs we've been in coordination with that are within the NGOs that we're currently working with. That's what we're trying to like hone in at the moment so that we can like maintain those discussions and those connections with the NGOs that are partnered or the research labs are partnered with, so that we can in fact scale this to areas like Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia.
All right, is that it for questions? Okay, great work, Living Waters.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. I am so incredibly proud of these teams. It has been a hard-fought summer, and this was a wonderful way to celebrate all of their hard work. So thank you to our teams for just a wonderful summer and presenting your progress today. Thank you to our judges, Manish, Ken, Priya, Andrea. I thoroughly enjoyed our panel today. There's a lovely trend happening in the demo days where yesterday gave me a lot of hope. Today gave me a lot of hope. I hope we can continue that throughout the rest of the week. I'd like to thank again our donors. So the Caruso Zio Foundation, Donna and Philip Zarconi, Ellen Rudnick and Paul Earl for their support in making this Summer Accelerator possible. Please join us for our remaining 2 demo days. So we've got technology focused on marketplace and SaaS tomorrow, and then Thursday we're covering e-commerce and retail.